Welcome back to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, the show where the future refuses to sit still, and neither do I. I'm your host, Ira Wolfe. You know that moment when you finally get the hang of something? Then boom, the ground on which we're standing seems to move. In this episode, I'm diving into whether the real problem is lightning fast tech or just old habits. In other words, is tech really outpacing what people can handle, or have we just forgotten how to keep up? Once again, I'm stepping out of the spotlight so you can lock into this raw, honest debate. Hang on, it's about to get interesting. Let's dive in.
So by the year 2060, the amount of societal and technological change that took an entire year to unfold back in 2020 will happen in just 12 days.
Wow.
Right? Just let that sink in for a second. If you're listening to this on your commute right now, think about the very foundation of your career. I mean, how do you plan a career or build a secure life when the timeline of reality itself is collapsing that fast?
And, if you are on that commute, there is a very good chance you're feeling the weight of that collapse right now. Because the data says 41% of you are reporting extreme stress on any given day.
Yeah.
And 1 in 6 of you are flat out miserable. You're feeling that friction because, we are treating human beings like software that just needs a daily patch update.
Which brings us to the core tension of our discussion today, drawn straight from recent insights on the never-normal workplace and the explosion of generative AI. On one side of this issue, I will be arguing that continuous, proactive professional reinvention is now our only remaining form of job security.
Okay.
The schedule of change is collapsing so rapidly that adaptability is the ultimate and really the only career insurance left. Job security used to mean having a skill no one else had. Today, job security means having the meta skill to learn whatever is needed tomorrow.
And I am taking the position that treating constant, relentless adaptability as an absolute mandate is an unsustainable treadmill.
But it leads directly to the widespread burnout we are already seeing, and it dangerously devalues the deep foundational expertise and stability that organizations and, honestly, human nervous systems actually require to function without breaking.
Well, let's jump right into the mechanics of this timeline collapse, because I don't think people fully grasp how the physics of tech adoption have fundamentally broken the old career model. Historically, society gave you a grace period, right, to absorb major shifts.
Right, sure.
The telephone took 75 years to reach 100 million users. The personal computer gave us 16 years. Even mobile phones gave us 12 years to adjust our workflows.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT hit 100 million users in 2 months.
It's staggering.
It is. We are experiencing what the source material aptly calls the WTF moment, the jarring realization that the rules have changed overnight. We are looking at 170 million new jobs being created globally by 2030, while 92 million existing ones are permanently displaced. If you try to sit inside a static skill set, you aren't providing stability. You're choosing obsolescence.
Look, I hear the sheer velocity in those numbers, I really do. But we have to look at what we are actually asking people to throw away in response to that velocity.
Okay.
Consider the perspective of a veteran employee who has spent 30 years mastering a complex domain. Let's say global supply chain logistics. They know the edge cases. They know the relationships.
Right.
They understand the nuances of international vendor negotiations that a large language model simply cannot parse because those nuances aren't in any training data. They live entirely in human experience. Are we really saying that person is a bottleneck just because they haven't mastered AI prompt engineering by next Tuesday?
Well, no one is saying their 30 years of knowledge is worthless, but the delivery mechanism for that knowledge has to evolve or it just gets trapped.
But if we force them to completely reinvent their workflow every 6 months, we are discarding the very stability that makes their expertise valuable in the first place. When we talk about AI in the workplace, the focus should be augmented intelligence, not artificial replacement. The goal should be using these tools as a subtle assistant to execute current jobs better. If you bypass the veteran's deep foundational knowledge and rush to adopt whatever process the AI generates just because it's faster, you don't get innovation. You get fast, highly scalable mistakes.
we shouldn't have to live in the perpetual state of emergency just to prove our relevance.
Wait, but the state of emergency isn't something we are opting into. It is the water we are swimming in.
I disagree.
Well, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. If AI is an Iron Man suit for the brain, as the source suggests, isn't a veteran worker refusing to reinvent their workflow akin to a mechanic refusing to use power tools?
Think about it. Tony Stark is a certified genius, right? But without the suit, he physically cannot lift a car. The suit doesn't replace his brain, it scales his output exponentially. If your veteran logistics expert knows exactly how an engine works, but refuses to put on the suit because they feel more comfortable doing manual data entry, we wouldn't praise their dedication to stability. We would recognize that they are actively choosing inefficiency.
Okay.
They aren't just holding on to stability. The veteran worker who refuses to step into the Iron Man suit isn't protecting their expertise. They are limiting its application.
That's a great metaphor, I'll give you that. But let's break down what actually happens when you force everyone to wear the suit before we even understand the long-term biological effects of flying it.
Oh, come on.
No, seriously. You're talking about scaling output, but what happens to the underlying cognitive capital? The source material highlights a recent brain MRI study involving students who used ChatGPT to solve problems.
Right, I know the one.
When those students use the AI as a default to get their answers, the parts of their brains associated with deep cognitive processing simply did not light up. It wasn't that the AI damaged their brains, but they definitely weren't forging the neural pathways required for complex problem solving. If a veteran worker is pressured to constantly lean on the newest automated tech rather than firing up their deeply forged neural pathways of expertise, we risk hollowing out our actual intellectual capital. We speed up the output, sure, but we erode the underlying critical thinking that allows us to catch the AI's mistakes.
Actually, that MRI study proved the exact opposite of your point if we look at the mechanics of proper reinvention.
How so?
Because the students whose cognitive pathways didn't light up were the ones using AI as a default, just asking it a question, taking the first answer, and moving on. That isn't adaptability, that's surrender.
Well, true adaptability requires massive cognitive engagement. It's about using the AI to iterate, challenging its outputs, and demanding it critique your own logic. And this isn't just theory, by the way. Adaptability is increasingly recognized as a scientifically measurable capability. Have you looked at the McKinsey Delta study mentioned in our material?
I know the study, but expecting people to let me just explain the framework for the audience really quick, because it's crucial. Delta stands for distinct elements of talent. McKinsey wanted to know what specific skills would predict future employability in an automated world.
Right.
It wasn't coding, it wasn't math, it was cognitive adaptability and self-leadership. The research breaks adaptability down into 15 specific factors across 3 categories. First is ability, which includes grit, mental flexibility, and the literal capacity for unlearning. Second is character, involving emotional range and hope. And third is environment, which measures a person's support systems and stress levels. Because we can isolate and measure these factors, they can be learned. People can be taught the mechanics of navigating the J-curve.
And we need to explain what that J-curve actually means in practice because it's not pretty.
Right, okay. So the J-curve is the visual representation of change. When you adopt a new technology or unlearn a process, your performance doesn't go straight up. It dips down first.
Yeah.
It forms the bottom of a J. It requires high cognitive load. It's frustrating. You become temporarily less productive before you eventually climb out and reach a higher baseline of growth. By measuring and teaching adaptability, we can help workers navigate that painful dip.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You can measure grit all you want on a spreadsheet, but expecting average workers to embrace the pain of constant disruption without a safety net is a recipe for institutional failure, not innovation.
I'm glad you brought up the pain of that dip, because expecting everyday workers to constantly throw themselves down the painful dip of a J-curve completely ignores economic reality. When you're a single parent working in logistics, or a 55-year-old middle manager, a temporary drop in productivity during that J-curve dip could literally mean losing your job.
But the risk of doing nothing is getting replaced entirely.
True, but look closely at the source material's primary anecdote for this brave reinvention. The author talks about walking away from an 18-year career in dentistry because he felt restless and wanted to pivot into tech and business.
Yeah.
He frames it as a bold embrace of the unknown, but he explicitly acknowledges that he walked away with a financial cushion. He had the luxury of a safety net.
Well, sure.
A calculated risk, underwritten by capital, is very, very different from demanding a paycheck-to-paycheck worker reinvent their entire skill set every 3 years. Treating constant adaptability as a mandate assumes everyone has the financial and emotional bandwidth to endure the J-curve.
I hear you.
When 41% of the workforce is already reporting extreme stress, telling them they just need to improve their grit and embrace the pain of constant disruption feels wildly out of touch with human nature.
Okay, if you were part of that 41% feeling extreme stress, I completely understand why the word reinvention sounds like code for more unpaid labor. I do. But let's look at the actual mechanism of that stress.
Okay.
The text specifically notes that most people save their coping skills for massive, catastrophic life disruptions. For the daily, compounding technological changes, they try to just white-knuckle through it.
Right.
They cling to the illusion that their comfort zone is coming back. The psychological friction, the stress, comes directly from their desire for a static world colliding with the reality of a dynamic one. By treating growth as a permanent condition rather than a temporary emergency, you actually reduce long-term stress.
You think that reduces stress?
Yes, because you shift your mindset to viewing yourself as an employment agency of one. Yes, it requires intense emotional regulation, but if you wait for a risk-free, perfectly subsidized environment to reinvent yourself, it will be too late.
But speaking of waiting until it's too late, what happens when an entire institution buys into your premise, forces a massive pace of reinvention, and it results in institutional failure? Because we don't have an infinite capacity to adapt without foundational structures collapsing.
Well, if you want to talk about foundational structures collapsing, we don't even have to look at hypotheticals. Let's look at the ultimate institution of stability, higher education. It's feeling in real time precisely because it refuses to adapt. We have multiple colleges in Pennsylvania alone that have closed their doors in the last 12 to 24 months. And why? Because tenured faculty are bringing yesterday's map to today's landscape. They are teaching the exact same subjects in the exact same way they did 30 years ago.
I mean, I would argue they are closing for complex demographic and financial reasons, not just because a professor prefers physical textbooks.
It's directly tied to relevance, though. The traditional four-year degree model is being disrupted because it is fundamentally too slow. Think about the students who entered college in 2021.
Okay.
When they started, ChatGPT didn't exist for the public. By their senior year, it was ubiquitous in every corporate office. The schools that just reflexively ban AI out of a fear of plagiarism are missing the entire paradigm shift. We are moving beyond basic generative AI into the era of agentic AI.
Let's clarify that distinction for the listener, just to be sure.
Sure, generative AI will write a draft of an email if you ask it to. Agentic AI is an autonomous system that can execute multi-step functions on its own. You don't just ask it for a draft, you give it a goal.
Right.
You say, research these 10 competing colleges, analyze their tuition models, draft emails to their deans, and send them at 8 a.m. tomorrow. It fundamentally shifts the human role from a creator of content to a manager of agents.
Wow.
If higher education administration and faculty don't undergo radical reinvention, moving toward experiential learning, offering micro-credentials, and embedding agentic AI directly into the curriculum, they leave their students entirely defenseless for the modern workplace. And honestly, this isn't just an issue with older faculty.
Oh.
The text points out that even Gen Z isn't automatically tech-savvy. A third of those students hadn't even used AI tools or only used them to try and sneak a paper past a professor. Continuous learning is non-negotiable across all generations.
Okay, but I will fiercely defend the need for slow, deliberate thought in higher education. The source material observes something crucial about these desperate college reinventions.
What's that?
Often institutions are just taking the old box and throwing new ingredients in. We have to be incredibly careful here. The pedagogical value of a traditional four-year degree isn't in learning the most bleeding-edge software.
Why not?
Because whatever software they learn as a freshman is obsolete by senior year anyway.
The value is in developing rigorous, fundamental critical thinking, the scientific method, historical analysis, ethical reasoning, the ability to construct a logical argument. These cognitive architectures do not operate on a 12-day collapse cycle.
But the medium through which we apply those architectures does.
Yes, but you don't burn down the foundation just to change the wallpaper. Faculty provide a necessary intellectual anchor. If an institution completely upends its curriculum every time a new tech startup goes viral, it sacrifices depth for relevance. And relevance is fleeting. Let me finish this thought. The source mentions the AI dilemma, noting that even the developers of these AI tools don't fully understand their capabilities. They are constantly discovering that the AI can do things they didn't explicitly program it to do, almost as if it's hiding its own intelligence.
Yeah, that's true.
So if the technologists themselves do not fully understand the ground truth of what they're building, why on earth should a university abandon decades of proven pedagogical stability to blindly chase it? Yes, engage with the tools, but do not mistake hyper-focusing on short-term technological trends for actual education.
You are creating a false binary between deep thinking and rapid adaptation. No one is saying we abandon the scientific method.
Okay.
We are saying that if a professor teaches writing but refuses to let students use AI to test, critique, and refine their arguments, they aren't protecting the students' minds. They are actively handicapping them. If you don't teach students, and if veteran workers don't teach themselves how to navigate the velocity of modern change, all the deep domain expertise in the world won't matter because it won't connect to the realities of the market. Adaptability is the bridge that connects human expertise to automated efficiency.
A bridge is a great concept, but structurally, a bridge needs to connect two solid pieces of land. If everything is fluid, if every skill is constantly in motion, you aren't building a bridge. You are just treading water in the middle of the ocean. And human beings cannot tread water forever. We physiologically require periods of consolidation. The immense danger of this never-normal narrative is that it demands a level of perpetual vigilance that our nervous systems are simply not designed to sustain. Even the smartest innovators recognize this. Look at Jeff Bezos. He famously said that instead of constantly asking what's going to change in the next 10 years, we should be asking what's not going to change.
Right.
People will always want reliable delivery. In the workplace, what is not going to change is the fundamental human need for psychological safety, clear expectations, and the time to achieve genuine mastery before being told to throw it all away and pivot again.
That Bezos quote is brilliant, but think about how it applies to the individual. Psychological safety doesn't come from an external promise that your job won't change. No company can promise you that anymore.
Unfortunately.
True psychological safety comes from the internal confidence that you possess the skills to handle whatever change arrives. That is the essence of job security today. The more you flex that adaptability muscle, the less you fear the collapsing timeline because you know how to learn.
And yet, as the source points out, that creates a punishing paradox.
Which is?
The more adaptable you become, the more adaptability is demanded of you. It's a treadmill where the speed keeps increasing. I am simply arguing that we must intentionally preserve spaces of stability, whether that means respecting the seasoned expertise of a veteran logistics manager or protecting the pedagogical core of a university.
Yeah.
So that when we do engage with these rapid changes, we do so from a grounded position, rather than reacting out of perpetual panic.
So, to synthesize where we've landed today, my position remains that the timeline of the future is actively collapsing right in front of us. The sheer volume and complexity of change mean that the comfortable, static house of expertise we used to build is no longer a viable shelter. Adaptability, as a scientifically measured, learned, and practiced skill, is the only functional life vest remaining in a sea of disruption. Constant reinvention isn't just an annoying corporate trend. It is the fundamental baseline for professional survival.
And my position is that while we must engage intentionally with these massive technological shifts, discarding the concept of career stability entirely in favor of endless reinvention is a profound structural mistake.
Right.
It completely ignores the severe human toll of constant stress, it devalues deeply forged domain expertise, and it treats the workforce as infinitely elastic when we are in fact human beings who need anchors just as much as we need agility.
I think where we absolutely find common ground is the acknowledgement that generative AI, agentic AI, and tools like them are not passing fads. The toothpaste is out of the tube and it's not going back in.
Completely agreed. Refusing to interact with the technology or viewing it with some sort of entitled defiance is a surefire way to become obsolete.
Yeah.
Continuous learning is non-negotiable for both the veteran employee with 30 years of experience and the incoming Gen Z worker. We just diverge heavily on the required speed, the necessary structural safety nets, and the totalizing nature of that learning.
Exactly. It brings us back to the central metaphor from the source material. We cannot stop the waves of disruption. Not you, not your company, not the developers writing the algorithms. The waves are coming regardless.
The only question is how you prepare for them.
Right. There is so much more to explore in the material about how organizations are specifically structuring this transition. But for now, we leave you to look at your own career and decide.
Yeah.
Given the velocity of change, do you need to spend your energy building a better surfboard, or are you seeking a stable anchor to weather the storm?
Thank you for listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I welcome your feedback, your challenges, and your shares with your connections, colleagues, and clients. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And remember, don't let the shift hit your plan.